And welcome, Sister Katherine. It's very nice to have you here today with us to discuss on this topic of overcoming difficult emotions, which is very, very relevant for everyone who's listening. So let's dive right into it. So my first question would be is what is emotion in general? Because quite often I've heard people, and even myself, sometimes I use the term feeling and emotions interchangeably. And just wanted to understand if there's any difference between the two, if it is. Yeah.
Thanks, Gary. Yeah, there's actually a big difference between emotions and feelings. Really, if we think about emotions as just really, it's something that can be measured physically. It's one of those, I'll just say, human responses to a situation. So it's usually instinctive, and it happens instantly when we're in a situation. So often we hear about that fight or flight response. So it's our emotions that give us the energy to actually respond in either a fight or flight. And feelings are actually quite different. You can think of feelings as something that sort of helps us, it sort of gives expression to our emotions. So it's also something that can have a big influence on us, but it's often really associated with how we are responding to something, like how we are feeling and how we are thinking about that situation. So, I mean, a classic emotion is fear, and feelings of fear emerge when we're in that, I'll just say, life-threatening situations. And pretty much if you found a group of people who were all in that same sort of threatening situation, they're all going to have the same sort of fear response. But actually, there's a lot of difference in how each of us might feel in that situation. So our feelings might be different. So I think this is probably one of the main differences. So our feelings are really, they come second. So the emotion comes first, the feelings come second. And it's the feelings that help us actually give understanding to the emotion.
Okay, so you're saying basically emotions are more of a reactive response to a situation,
Yeah.
and feelings is what is the result of that emotion which we create.
Yeah, that's right. It's like,
Okay.
what's our interpretation of that
Okay.
situation? So,
So if it's a reactive, it's more of a reactivity instead of a
yeah.
response. And is it like wrong to have emotions as such, or?
No, I mean, I think the thing is with emotions, they're part of our core physiology. Everyone has emotions, so there's nothing wrong with emotions as such. They have a purpose. They are designed to, support our survival instinct. I think where we have more control and probably what's more of interest is the feelings that we create. Um, so we create feelings through our thoughts and through, we create feelings. So I guess we might have a response, an emotion in a situation, but how we think about that is then going to lead to more emotion. So again, some of this sounds a bit abstract. So if I can just give a more specific example, um, the the emotion can actually be a response to something that's either real or imagined. So historically, we might have found ourselves in a genuinely life-threatening situation where we were being chased by a lion. This is often the example that's given. But in our modern world, how often are we actually ever chased by a lion? We might occasionally see a spider or something, but rarely are we actually faced with a
Yeah.
life-threatening situation. So why is it that we feel so much fear in our modern life? Often it's imagined. So how does this happen? It's based on our thoughts. We keep thinking about something, and then that triggers our emotions. We start to have a physiological response. Because again, emotions can be triggered by something that's real, like a lion, or something that's imagined, like, oh, what happens if I lose my job tomorrow? You know, the life threat, you know, again, it threatens our, I guess to some extent, not really our human survival, but the things that we think that we need to survive in the modern world. You know, I need to have a stable job. I need to have a relationship. I need to have good family relationships. I need all these things to survive. But realistically, they're actually not something that we need for our physical survival. Often these things are really just how we're thinking about our life in the current world. And when we overthink things and when we have negative thoughts and waste thoughts about some of the circumstances in our life, we can actually be creating negative emotions. So emotions in themselves are not bad. As I said, they serve a purpose. But I guess and again, I don't want to say it's bad, but I think the the trap that we all fall into is that through our thoughts, we're creating feelings and we're triggering emotions because of those repeated feelings. We're ruminating over stress. We keep thinking about things that are going wrong. What might happen? This could happen. But again, the more we think about it, the way the brain responds is that it starts to perceive a genuine threat that's not really there. It's just a product of our thinking. So I would say emotions in themselves are not bad, but sometimes the way we keep thinking about situations can actually have a very negative impact.
All right. So now, two things here. One, you mentioned that it is based on what we think. So this one question would be on the thought patterns. Like these thought patterns are always also like more of a reactivity. Something happens, there is a trigger, and there is this huge stream of thoughts without even one's conscious intervention. It just starts off, which leads to those emotions. That's one aspect. And second is, let's say we do feel that emotion. We have reached to a point wherein we feel it in our being. And now expressing that becomes a challenge quite often, depending on where we are, with whom we are, and we may or may not express. We may bottle it in, or we may just burst out, depending on the emotion. So, two aspects. One is, if we already have the emotion, how do we kind of express it in a healthy way? And then we can come to the next part, how not to be reactive in the first place. But maybe we can take the expression bit first. Yeah.
Okay, so again, I think if it's a genuine threat, then how we respond needs to be something that's going to be supporting our well-being. But if it's actually an emotion that we've actually created, then obviously the first step is to actually be more aware of what are my emotions, and do a bit of a reality check of are they genuinely a threat to me, or how much of this is actually just a byproduct of my thinking and my thinking patterns. So if we do have I'll say a strong emotion like anger, then again the common thoughts of this are, if you don't express anger, then there'll be some sort of negative impact. Oh, this is why people get cancer, or this is why people feel repressed, or they have some other health problem. But again, I would encourage people who are joining this program, there's obviously something that you're aware of, which is that there is a spiritual perspective on life, which means that we don't have to be bound by what some people would call conventional wisdom. So even though many people would say, if you don't express your anger, that's going to be unhealthy, from a spiritual perspective, I would question, Why am I getting angry? So this first step is to become more aware of what's happening in my inner world.
Mhm.
So as a meditation teacher and student, then when I sit for meditation, what I'm actually doing is I'm actually watching what's happened to me today. I'm checking in with myself. What sort of interactions have I had? What sort of emotions have come up? What sort of feelings do I have? And sometimes it's because I keep having the same sorts of feelings that different strong negative emotions come up. So I'd say the liberating aspect of this is that we are not at the mercy of our emotions. As I said, mostly we are not facing life-threatening situations. A lot of these things are being given too much prominence in our own mind or being exaggerated, or they become negative because of how we worry about things. So again, rather than thinking, okay, I feel angry, so I obviously need to express that, I would look at, why am I becoming angry? And from a spiritual perspective, what's underneath that? And often anger is just, again, it's another expression. Underneath it might actually be fear. And it might not be okay for me to think that I'm fearful. But if I really am true, if I really ask myself truthfully, often I think that there's fear that sits under anger. And anger is the way that we express ourselves because we feel like we need to protect ourselves. So, for example, if anger is the way that I protect myself, maybe it's the only way that I feel that people will listen to me. If I feel that I need something and people repeatedly ignore that, or people are trying to impose things on me that I don't want in my life, then really anger could be in my own mind a way that I protect myself from not doing something else that I don't want to do. I don't want to get angry, but I'd rather get angry rather than do something I don't want to do. So anger is actually my protection as well. But I would not say that that's the primary emotion. It's actually a secondary response. What's sitting underneath it is a fear. What will my life be like if this person gets what they want and again I don't get what I need? So anger can just be a protection. Then I guess again human relationships are complicated, but of course we're also a bit fearful that if I damage relationships then there's other consequences. So do I get angry and potentially damage relationships? Well, potentially the benefit is at least that person might stop what they're doing, which will make my life a bit better or easier. But then you get the negative side of anger, because anger is a vice and it will have a negative response. And it does have a negative response on myself as well. I might start to think of myself as an angry person. I might have damaged that relationship. And again, I would come back to, from a spiritual perspective, why do I still need to rely on anger to protect myself? How can I learn to communicate more effectively so that I can be heard, so that my needs can be met? So again, I think there's lots of, again, none of this is, I'll say, tidy or simple. Anger is a emotion. Anger is a feeling. Anger is a self-protection. But ultimately, there is something negative about anger. So from a spiritual perspective, do I want to rely on anger when I'm sure that there are so many other alternatives? So just as feelings are different, each of our methods can be different. So rather than getting angry, I might focus on being content, being accepting, being easy. Other people might focus on courage. They might focus on, how do I, ensure that my life moves in the direction that I choose. They might focus on discernment, decision making. Everybody will find their own way through that situation. But I would argue, why do we need to keep relying on anger as an emotion in some ways it's an excuse, because we haven't given that thought to, if I'm spiritually powerful, what is a better way for me to respond in that situation? We all have the choice. We can respond in anger, and that will have certain consequences, and we live with those consequences. And we might choose not to be angry. We might be repressing anger. That takes a lot of energy. And again, it will have a negative impact on our physiology. But there is a third way, which is to choose something different. Choose a different way of responding. And again, at the root of that is self-awareness. And how do I think about these situations? When I start to change the way I think about the situations, then my response is going to be different. My feelings are going to be different, and my emotions are going to be different.
All right. So you're saying that instead of expressing anger or repressing anger, there's a third way, which is being more aware of that emotion and why is it there in the first place and what is triggering it. Just being more aware of
Exactly.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's nice to be honest with ourselves.
Mhm.
Like sometimes I think, especially for women, it's hard to admit I'm an angry person, but I'm not really an angry person. I might think, because again, our true self-respect is based on the awareness that I am a soul. My qualities are love, peace, happiness, etc. But really, if I'm responding time and time again with anger, I can start to think of myself as I am an angry person. I am frustrated. I am shy. I am jealous. None of us want to admit these things. But the good thing is these are actually not who we are. These are really just coping strategies.
Mhm.
So the good thing is, look at this as a signal. The fact that I am getting angry is telling me there's something wrong with this dynamic. At a deep level, there is something that I feel threatened by, I'm not happy with. At a soul, I want to move in a different direction. I might feel frustrated. I might feel trapped, whatever it is, but there's something that's triggering this anger. But as a soul, we naturally want to be happy. We want to be peaceful because that's what our natural state is.
Yeah.
None of us want to be angry. So, but the thing is, what is triggering this anger? And if it's just my own thoughts, that's the easiest thing to resolve, because I can start to just change the way I think about these situations. Does this person really have that much control over me? Or can I just choose to do things differently? So sometimes we're not as trapped as we think we are.
Yeah.
Why does one person get angry and another person doesn't? That other person probably doesn't feel trapped. They probably do feel like that they've got other options available to them.
Yeah.
So how do I think about myself? How do I think about the situation? These are the things that need to change.
Yeah. In my observation, I mean, at least a couple of triggers I can think of right now is one is that I've noticed that quite often when I do not say what I have to say, then for whatever reasons, and then it's in my head only, and then it happens multiple times till the point it reaches a point wherein it comes out with a lot of force.
Yes.
And as you mentioned, right, anger is also used as a tool to be heard. So what I couldn't say for so long, it kind of bottles up and then
Yeah.
it comes out not so kind ways.
Yeah. Yes.
That is one instance. And also the belief that I am right and
Yeah.
the other person should behave or act in accordance to what I feel is right, especially in the context of family and close relations. Um, so those are the times when this particular emotion is like trying to force in a way. Just by using that force, we're trying to change something which is not in our control to change anyways. So
Yeah.
those are the
Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, this is really important. And if you even listen to what you're saying, and again, not just you, everybody who's listening, it's really important to really be specific. If you look at the thoughts that you keep repeating in your mind, and when there are strong feelings associated with them, they will have an impact. And sometimes it gets to the point where we can't control it anymore. And there's part of us that doesn't want to control it anymore. We already feel like we're being repressed. I want to say something. What's true for me? I feel like I can't say that. And then even thinking, oh, I can't speak my truth. Other people speak, but I'm not allowed to, or all of these waste thoughts that keep going around, they build up and build up. And as you say, exactly, one time you just have that one thought and it's enough that you can't control it anymore. And then that really strong emotion comes out. But what I'd encourage you to do is actually look at, really be clear, what is the word or what is the phrase that you say to yourself, which is the trigger. It's like the final straw. So, and I would just share a work example. Once I was feeling really, really stressed in work and unsupported. So it was a very busy time. We were a little bit understaffed. There were dynamics in the team where the boss was a bit divisive or not supportive. She was blaming and so on. So it wasn't a healthy team culture. And in this situation, I felt like it was my responsibility to do a particular job to a particular standard. And I didn't feel like there was anyone in the team who could support me. And so I felt more and more pressure as more and more work came on my plate. And what I said to myself was, I can't cope. And what happened after that? I got angry. So what happens when we get angry? Usually our brain switches off and all of it just comes out. We say things that are going to damage relationships. We say things that we might regret later. But basically, I said something in the workplace. I said, you're not supporting me. This is not, I'm not going to be blamed for this. So it all came out. The consequence of that, obviously, was that I damaged relationships in the workplace. After that, again, after the situation resolved, what happened was not only did I not get support when I felt I needed it, because I damaged the relationships, I was going to get even less support. So I had too much work. I felt I couldn't cope. And then on top of that, I had even less support. So what I learned from that situation is it's actually not true that I can't cope, but certainly because of my reaction, I can always make this worse. I can make it harder on myself by getting angry. So what I decided in that moment is I will not get angry again. It damages relationships. And then, of course, it takes months to fix those relationships. Again, more effort. More effort to fix those relationships.
Yeah.
I've already got too much work to do. Now I have more work to do. So it just doesn't make sense to get angry. So I really made that firm decision. So that's one thing, the power of determination, the power of decision, the power of realization. This in itself can actually change, I'll say, the course of our lives. The other thing that I found useful in that situation was I realized what was that trigger. I said to myself, I can't cope. So then what happened after that, I realized the importance of that phrase. So now when I get stressed, it actually doesn't happen anymore in the same way. Everything always changes. But I no longer say that to myself. But what happened was after that situation, when I noticed that I was starting to feel like I couldn't cope, that was instantly a trigger for me to check myself. What's happening? You can cope. And if you get angry, you'll have to cope with more. So again, I'm laughing because these situations happen to everybody, and they're kind of funny. Like the thing that we need the most, we actually push away because we respond with negative, strong emotions. What do we want? We want love. We want support. We want to feel safe, and we want to be successful. These are all natural desires. And then when we get so stressed, these strong emotions are actually going to make it even less likely that what we want deep down, we actually want the most, which is all natural, we're going to have even less likelihood of achieving that because we damage relationship through this intense expression of negativity. So for me, knowing what is my trigger, I can't cope.
Mm-hmm.
Then from a place of, I'll say, clarity, spiritual awareness, I ask myself, is that true? Actually, no, it's not true. I can cope with more. And the less stressed I am, I can actually cope with more. But at some point, from a place of clarity and spiritual power, I need to let the people around me know that I'm doing the best that I can, and it's not actually possible to do anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So see how it comes from a place of clarity, spiritual power, rather than rah, 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 you know,
Yeah.
an angry outburst. So again, the outcome is going to be different. So again, all of this to me highlights, again, to me, when we are living life in the current times where there's so much competition, there's so much expectation, our supports tend to be fluctuating. You know, sometimes our friends are there to support us and sometimes they just can't. It doesn't mean that they're not good friends, doesn't mean that they're not loving family. It just means everybody's in the same boat. Everybody's struggling with way too much pressure at the moment. And it's, in a way, it's almost unfair to put more pressure on them. So what we do from a spiritual perspective in Raj Yoga is start to look at, how do I build the faith again in myself? How do I nurture my spirit? How do I develop my spiritual strength so that I can actually deal with these stressful situations in a way that's going to be beneficial for myself, but also beneficial for others? So in that situation, another response could have been, well, I'm going to just quit. I'm going to take a sickie tomorrow. I'm going to blame somebody for what went wrong. So these are all things that are happening in our work environments. Everybody's playing these games. From a spiritual perspective, I don't need to play these games. From a spiritual perspective, I can have the awareness that I, the soul, am losing my peace. What do I need to do to help me sustain my peaceful stage? And how do I actually be like an agent of peace in these stressful environments? So not only do I need to respond to the stressful environments, again, because we pick up on these stressful atmospheres. If the people around us are stressed, we're going to feel stressed. But as a soul, I have the capacity to nurture my own spirit, to be peaceful, to be powerful, and also then that then also has a positive impact on others. So I am the agent of peace in those stressful atmospheres. So again, that much power, that much clarity, that much self-respect. And this is what comes from meditation. Having that time every day to come back to myself, stabilize in peace, experience peace, and basically build my resilience in a way that helps me thrive in environments that are inherently unhealthy for most human beings.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
So if I can summarize, so basically, as we become more self-aware of all these emotions, and we can narrow down the triggers to the self-talk that we have, as you mentioned in your example, I cannot cope. So many times we often consider the triggers to be outside of us, but as you mentioned, the triggers could be our reactive thoughts to what is happening. So if we can narrow it down to that, and then using a spiritual strength, change that narrative that's going on in our head, and that will allow us to respond in a different way and give us more options to choose and how we want to respond instead of acting out of that emotion.
Thank you. Good
Yeah.
summary. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, sister, for
Thank
sharing
you.
these insights. Really appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you. And
Thank
thank you
you.
for hosting, and thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Om Shanti.
Om Shanti.